Our destiny is to be filled with God. To be so filled with God that every moment is a God experience, a God spell, if you will. Our destiny is to be so turned on by those God qualities of beauty and peace and power and wisdom and strength. To be so alive with that divine nature that we will truly be living above ourselves. We'll be coming from a place above ourselves. This will not happen in time, some future time, because in the universe there is no such place as some future time. This can only happen to us when we fulfill the conditions of its happening. We seek to be filled with the Spirit, this Holy Spirit, this whole Spirit, this complete self. That's what the Holy Spirit is. The whole thing. All of it. And there's nothing left out of it. How would you like to have that be you? Well, it is. How would you like to be filled with it? Someone once said that the first step in filling a container is to be sure it's empty. And the master teacher said, you can't pour this new wine into the old flasks. One must have a new container, and this is the process in which you and I have been involved. We have been emptying the old container, have we not? Preparing ourselves for a new experience, for an infilling, an influx, a movement within ourselves. And life on this earth is stacked for us in such a way that if we do not cooperate with the divine experience that is ours, then we will be forced into a deeper awareness of what the Father has in store for us, and we are forced into our good in a very strange way. That which appears to be our bad makes us begin to look at life to find our good. You know what I mean about that which appears to be our bad. Have you ever experienced a crisis in your life? Have you? In times of crises and seeming tragedy, aren't there moments when you feel utterly abandoned and completely helpless? Haven't there been times when you felt crushed by events, by people, and have come to know your own personal powerlessness? Has it not been in those moments when you could pause and seek with all your heart to know a higher meaning and purpose in life? Because until those events took place, you were doing pretty good, thank you, and I really don't have much time. See you later. It's been nice, but watch my smoke. No. Now, crisis times have a beautiful way at setting to zero the ordinary concerns of daily life. You know how in ordinary life the day is filled with so many important things. Oh, so many important things that consume our minds and our thoughts and our emotions. Well, let a real crisis hit you and you'll find out that there aren't very many important things around anymore. So crisis times and zero moments can be real blessings in our lives, in yours and mine. William James, the father of American psychology, and most of us are familiar with him, James felt that the most convincing evidence of God lies primarily in inner personal experience. This is the greatest psychologist that our nation has produced, talking about God as an inner personal experience, not an idea, not a religious affiliation, not my personal concept about God, but an experience. an experience with the Spirit, with the whole Spirit, with all of God, right where I am, an experience that transforms. Now, he said that the starting point is the sense of emptiness and frustration. I'm not trying to imply to you that anyone here has to hit a bottom in their lives, but the starting point of the new octave, and that's what we're always looking for, is a new octave, a new note, a new do, re, mi, that we're striking, moving forward into a new experience. And that new starting point is always when we hit that sense of emptiness and frustration and can admit it, can stop lying about it and trying to cover it up, in other words. And he published his findings in his great book, Varieties of Religious Experience, and his other book, Pragmatism. As a young man, James had experienced poor health, and this caused him frequent periods of depression and discouragement. We don't know very much about that, you and I. And about the same time, he seemed to have gone through a spiritual crisis, which manifested itself in a lack of motivation and purpose. There was not much zeal, no motivation in his life. And slowly he began to realize that he needed a unifying philosophy of life. A unifying philosophy of life. That's strange language from a psychologist. Not only did William James need it, but I believe that we all need it. And what he meant, and what I mean by a unifying philosophy of life, a system of thoughts that are consistent with each other. A series of ideas, things that we believe, all of which sustain and support each other, that don't cancel each other out. If you'll examine your own thought process, and if you will observe people closest to you, you'll find very quickly that they believe certain things very deeply, but then in just a few moments they believe other things very deeply that are inconsistent with the first things they believe very deeply. That's not very unifying, friends. And then in a few more moments, if you will observe, they will feel some things that are not at all consistent with what they thought. They're fragmented. There's no unity within them. Their enemy is not without. Their enemy is the inconsistency of their thought. They speak very brave words, but don't really believe those words in their heart. And we're told that as we think in our hearts, as we feel, so are we. So only when the two sides become a harmonious whole, a unity, only then do we begin to be a whole person. And only then do our responses to life become satisfactory to us and to the world around us. You see, what we believe and feel determines how we act in our lives, but if our thoughts are inconsistent, can you not see then how our days and our nights and our reactions will be inconsistent? But we will not think it is I that is inconsistent. We will say life is inconsistent, and this morning I felt so good and this afternoon I felt bad. That's rather inconsistent, isn't it? How would you like to live your days and your nights in a manner that was observably consistent, completely positive, totally successful? Well, do you think that's too much to believe, to expect? If you do, there's some inconsistency right there. Is there not? Why settle for half a loaf? If we're dealing with the whole Spirit, if there is a mind that is in us that can do all things, why do we let it do some things and not other things? That's inconsistent. Why do we lie to ourselves about some things, by that I mean pretend, and profess a deep honesty in other areas? That's inconsistent. You see, most people have not taken a searching and fearless look at their state of mind, at what goes on inside themselves. And for several weeks now, you and I have been seeking to do just that. Realizing that if we can gain a measure of control of our thought, We're not trying to use our thought to control the world. We're trying to use our thought to control our thought. If we get it shaped up, then the world's going to take care of itself. Do you believe that? Okay. That's something to work toward then. So in crises times, or in zero moments, or in the middle of the best day that you have ever had on the face of this earth, why should you be different? If you tell me that you should be one person when a good thing happens and another person when a so-called bad thing happens, I'll tell you that's inconsistent. You cannot be any more inconsistent than that. And you and I can only be that way because of the system of thinking and feeling that we have settled for within ourselves. And somewhere in our unfolding, we must put aside our inconsistencies, and no one can do this for us. And we're dealing with a process, 12 spiritual principles, when put together in one package in our mind, begin to help us to become one harmonious whole. Someone that can function well in good or bad, in the ebb and flow of life. Someone who can cancel this idea of the two impostors, good or bad, realizing that only thinking makes it so. And to that person, then, all that life is a series of events, all working together for the growth and the joy of the person. Now, that's being consistent. Someone passed me in the corridor earlier this week. They were excited about the fourth step, the inventory step, and sharing that with God and another human being and asking to have those things removed. And she said, I've been doing something that I knew was wrong in the past because it always depressed me when I did it then. But I took my inventory and asked God to remove the pain from this particular experience. She said, I thought it would be all right, and I started doing it again, and she said, you know that I'm just as depressed as I ever was? God didn't fix it. And she said, what do you call that? And I said, I call what you're doing now taking the 10th step of our program of being restored to our right minds, wherein that we continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admit it, and then go a step further, asking God to change it, not to take the pain away. That would be similar to an alcoholic saying, now I can drink successfully, rather than asking God to give him the power to not drink at all. You see how we are? We would like to have God make us able to do the thing that we cannot do successfully. There are certain kinds of unacceptable behavior that exist in the world, that the world has not yet called unacceptable behavior, because to man whose breath is in his nostrils, that behavior is not yet unacceptable. But to you who wish to follow the spiritual path, that behavior is not acceptable. You cannot take it where you wish to go. You can only be separated from that kind of behavior, and this behavior takes roughly two different forms: the externalized and visible expression of unacceptable behavior, and a form that cannot be seen with the eye, that takes place within the mind of a person, that movement of thought and feeling inside us that is so secret that we think no one will behold it, but they will see it eventually. We think in secret, but it comes to pass. The environment is but our looking glass. So, as we have worked these first 9 steps of our program of being restored to our spiritual condition, we have come to see a number of things about ourselves that must be separated from. And in like manner, we have come to see a number of other attractive and beautiful spiritual qualities that we have fallen short in that must be put on. And we're in the process of putting off the old and separating from those things that rob us of our true identity and of our joy and peace and happiness and prosperity. And we have willingly admitted that we have created some wreckage, some damage in our past lives, and we have gone out now to face that and to make correction and restitution where we could. But we're now coming into another phase of our unfolding, wherein that we, in using step 10, begin to put on a way of living, a day-to-day way of living that we use in fair weather or foul weather, so that we may not create more wreckage or damage. Why clear away, why go to all the effort that we've gone to face ourselves and to be restored, and say, gosh, that's nice, and then go back out and do the same thing again? That does not make very good sense, does it? Now, something must monitor our actions. There must be a monitor. An eye that sees, and an ear that hears, and a mind that observes, and all quite lovingly, so that we will not have that same experience again. And we're talking about a step now wherein we become our own monitor, where we continue to take personal inventory. We continue to observe ourselves on a moment-to-moment, experience, day-to-day basis, something that we never ever did before, and something that we have no precedent for in our life. Our church did not teach us this, nor did our parents, and certainly our friends kept the secret from us. It's not taught at the university. The university says, in effect, maybe not in class, but with your peer group, you can do anything you want to as long as you can get away with it, as long as the fuzz don't catch you and the red lights don't flash. But you and I have come to know that that is not so, that there are many things that we never could get away with, although we tried desperately, and we could not. There are certain things that will not work, and so they're bad. That's what a bad thing is, something that won't work. And a good thing is something that does work. And sinning merely means trying to do something that won't work. Well, it'll work, but it's not worth it. That's what sinning is. That's all it is. So now you and I are going to take a continuous look at our assets and liabilities with the idea that we are seeking to grow along spiritual lines. Suddenly, our spiritual growth has become the most important thing in our lives. We're willing to admit that we're only halfway home, and that in our present state, that's not enough to get us into this cosmic consciousness, this kingdom of godness that we seek. And we're willing to go to any lengths now to put aside on a continuing basis all of the things, both external and internal, that have kept us from our good. Is that correct? Is that where you are? I'll guarantee you that's where I am. Now, we've learned this the hard way. This is a lesson that you have paid for, friends. You bet. Experienced, wise, spiritual people in all times have learned this lesson, and in learning it, they have reached the place that they have become willing to practice unsparing self-survey, observation, and loving criticism, something that they never could do before, nor could you or I. Keep it hidden. Now, it cannot be hidden. The wise ones have always known that no one can make much of his life until self-searching becomes a regular habit, and until he is able to admit and accept what he finds, and until he is willing to patiently and persistently work to correct the errors and the mistakes, both without and within, that are there. And it's not a dark, heavy thing. It begins to be the most fun there is in life. Because if we can find something that needs to be corrected, in that moment, we have an opportunity to grow and to improve in a dramatic way. Our growth is not so much the putting on of new intellectual ideas as it is the releasing of things that no longer work. If I can find something that doesn't work, I have done the most positive thing I can do that day, if I'm willing to ask for God's help and yours to correct it. You know, there are lots of different kinds of hangovers in life. We know the kind that the alcoholic has because he drank heavily yesterday, and he doesn't live too well today. There's another kind of hangover which we have all experienced in the past that was acceptable to us. It's the hangover that comes from giving ourselves permission to drink of anger and fear and jealousy and the like. We have let these unacceptable emotional responses to life be acceptable to us. Well, doesn't everybody do them? Of course. Now, if we're going to live serenely and successfully and prosper in all ways, these hangovers must be eliminated. And the kind of drunkenness, spiritual drunkenness that is experienced by the mind that permits themselves to partake of this forbidden fruit. And that mind must become willing to have new standards and new values and to observe itself in process. Not at the end of an era, a period, at the end of a month, a year, or 6 years later to sit down and say, oh, yes, I did those things. Now I will go out and clear away the wreckage. That was good, and we must do that again. But now we're coming to something that requires a new kind of effort, conscious effort, to catch yourself in the midst of the experience and change what's happening in the midst of the experience. And to have new values and new standards based on what we have learned about ourselves and about what works and what doesn't work. And the inventory is the process that we use to begin to observe ourselves. And there are several different kinds of inventories, all alike in principle, but usually it's the time factor that distinguishes one from another. And if you have some question about inventories, read step 10 in the book, 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. It's one of the basic textbooks of Alcoholics Anonymous. You can get them from any AA group or from our book room. There's the spot check inventory, taken at any time of the day or night, whenever we find ourselves getting all tangled up. Have you ever found yourself getting all tangled up? Then learn to take a spot check inventory. It's amazing what happens when you just stop and say, show me. Let the mind focus upon. And there it is. Suddenly there you will know, and it can be corrected. Then there are other occasions when alone or in the company of a spiritual advisor that you make a careful review of your progress since the last time that you took a major inventory. And many people go in for an annual or semi-annual house cleaning. And there are others of us that like to experience an occasional retreat from the outside world and go away for a day or two in an undisturbed period of self-overhaul and meditation. And the mind asks, well, isn't this a great waste of time and joy killer? Why be maudlin? Well, hardly it isn't. It becomes the most exciting thing that you can do. And it helps us to acquire that spiritually necessary habit of accurate self-appraisal. Accurate self-appraisal, something that very few people on earth have developed. Accurate self-appraisal. Healthy self-appraisal. And once this healthy practice has become grooved in your mind, then it will become so interesting and profitable that the time it takes won't be missed. Eventually it becomes a way of life. And you can do it just very quickly, very briefly. As a matter of fact, a great deal of the time that one might spend being worried or anxious or afraid or upset or angry, take half that time and take an inventory and spend the rest of the time having fun. Changes your life. It really will. Now, it's a spiritual axiom that every time that you and I are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there is something wrong with us. Oh. Did you think you misunderstood me? We have been looking for what was wrong with that other guy. No, whenever we are upset, there's something wrong with us. You see, the problem is never the problem. My reaction to it is the problem. Now, how many times have you had a reaction that was far in excess of the problem? If you will handle your reaction, you will, in like manner, have already handled the problem without faith. Do you believe that? That's a consistent thought. That's consistent with our spiritual condition. Now, a person in their psychological human condition will not believe that. They will not wish to believe that, and they have the perfect right to not believe that, because they like to find answers in external things, leaving themselves free to experience all kinds of unacceptable behavior that is still acceptable. I'd like to read to you an article that was in today's Detroit Free Press by Dr. Joyce Brothers, the great psychologist. It's entitled, "Everyone Has a Right to Feel Angry, Except Me." I don't give myself the right to feel angry, and you remind me of that if you ever see me doing it. Okay, let's start with that. Dear Dr. Brothers, for the past few years I've been suffering from what my doctor calls tension headaches. I've tried to analyze what causes the tension, and I've come to the conclusion that it's my own bad disposition. Every time I get really angry inside myself, I seem to get one of these headaches. Then I simply have to close the door to my room and isolate myself until the headache passes. This way, neither the children nor my husband have to suffer with me or put up with my bad disposition and complaints. Now, I submit to you right there that there's the first mistake. Imagine yourself living in the household with somebody who is in their bedroom with their door closed because of their bad disposition. And tell me how you like that. How does that grab you, friends? Is that what you bargained for? Now, I figured out this system. The next question is, what can I possibly do about it? I know there will always be things that bother and upset me. That's how life is. And I certainly can't control these outside forces, can I? I submit to you that that's the next mistake. No, I cannot control those outside forces, but God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. You see, something is being left out here, the possibility that I may be able to react differently to the outside forces. Psychology says that I cannot. Psychology says that I must act in a bad way when bad things happen. That's not consistent with my spiritual condition. Is it consistent with yours? No way. Maybe I should just learn to live with this problem and go in my bedroom and close the door. The answer, dear I am. I don't... I don't think you have to live with periods of life where you're locked away from others just when you may need them most. I think one answer might be to find different, more positive outlets for your discomfort and rage when you feel it. Everyone has a right to feel angry, and expressing anger doesn't deny love. We can love someone very dearly and also get very angry with him. Now, that's not consistent. Not in the spiritual condition. It's important for both children and adults to be aware of this so that they won't feel they have to bury their anger nor feel threatened when others express anger. Now, there are other things that are said here. You can read the article yourself. The whole idea is, one thing is left out. That anger, resentment, the negative emotions are acceptable behavior, normal and natural, and nothing can be done about them. And if you do something about them, you are suppressing them. And I submit to you that there is another possibility, that it might be possible to not experience them at all, but not from my human and psychological condition, from a spiritual self that exists within, that has never known anger and resentment, because they are inconsistent with love. And there is a principle that says that perfect love casteth out these feelings. That's consistent. Now, where do you think that came from? From the spiritual system that has been taught since wise men have walked on the face of this earth, and taught fairly recently in time by Jesus the Christ. Now, if you and I are going to believe in these systems consistently, then we cannot believe in unacceptable behavior emotionally because it's not consistent. Then, if this is true, if I believe, say that I profess to be whatever my spiritual or religious persuasion is, and act in another way, then I am lying, I am not consistent. And if I give myself the right to not be consistent, then how can I expect anything except the misery that the world experiences? Do you follow me, friends? Now, in order to, therefore, have another experience, I must begin to evaluate my life and decide that I no longer have the right to feel angry. You do. But if you do, I hope you go in some other room and close the door. You bet. I no longer have the right to be poor. If you should catch me being poor, remind me of that. I no longer have the right to be anything that is not consistent with my spiritual condition. Now, if this is true, I'm going to have to watch me like a hawk. Because I will say to you that I do not have this right, and then immediately may start acting in a different way and not see it. Unless I am willing to continue to observe myself and when wrong, promptly admit it and ask God to restore me to my spiritual condition. Oh, that makes me feel good just to think about it. Now, what about justifiable anger? Yeah, what about it? Justifiable anger. If someone cheats us, aren't we entitled to be mad? Can't we be properly angry with self-righteous folk? It's not consistent, is it? Not with the spiritual life. Not with love and joy and peace and all the things that you have come here tonight to see. Not with the healing in the body. Not if you want to live in a body that's not falling apart. Not if you want to live in a world that's not falling apart. So we have to catch ourselves. All kinds of inner emotional disturbances such as jealousy and envy and self-pity, hurt pride, and to begin to observe this inner phenomena that has been there all the time and has only been permitted to remain unchecked because we would not make the effort necessary to discover it and to eradicate it, thinking that we were going to pour our success and our happiness and our spiritual condition in on the top of it. We've had too many bricks in our bucket. Now, the best way to change a thing is to correct yourself in the process. I think perhaps I told you of the time in the earlier years of my spiritual growth when I caught myself not telling the truth a few times. Well, I didn't exactly lie. I just didn't tell the truth. And I said, Jack, the next time you do that and catch yourself doing that, you're going to have to stop and say to that person, I just lied. And I did. And I quit. You try that one time and you'll quit. And that's what an inventory is, catching yourself doing something that you ought not do, with the object of quitting doing it, not the object of blaming yourself for doing it. The object is to quit doing it because it is not consistent with what you want to experience on the face of this earth. There is no other way, friends. If you can find an easier, softer way, let us know. But no one has found it yet. You and I, somewhere along the way, must begin to monitor ourselves, actions of our mind and of our lives. Not that other one. Not that other person. We have monitored that other person, the one who's caused all the trouble. Did you know that that other person that you have in mind when you criticize or resent another is actually a projection of your own negative side? That everyone This is difficult to understand. Consider it. Everyone has a negative image of himself or herself. And when we really get put out with another person, it's usually because we are pointing toward some aspect of that negative image of ourselves that is so shattering when it comes to us from another person. And usually we draw to us people in our lives who correspond, their weakness fits ours. Their negative image impinges upon ours. And so you might say that since everyone is a little bit goofy or sick, that frequently when we say that we're in love with someone, it doesn't mean that at all. We're in sick with them. You understand me well, I can tell. Now, when we really wish to grow and make true progress, we become fearless and searching and strong to begin to go against this negative image of ourselves. We stop going against the other guy, that other one. That other one is all right. I'm going to turn that other one over to the care of God. Let God be his sponsor. I'm not going to fix him anymore. And the moment that I stopped trying to fix him, I realized a very strange thing. I never did. I never could. It never did work, nor will it ever. Has anyone ever fixed you? And when they try, do you like it? No. Now, we begin to burn our own smoke, go against our own selves, and take this unworthy image that we have, that we carry inside ourselves, and begin to redeem it and lift it up, and it begins to be the material, the food that we use to grow with. Because every time you can find an aspect of that negative self that you have and become willing for it to be changed, the most marvelous thing begins to happen. You can catch yourself being a big shot, not just in business, but in the spiritual life. Have you ever found yourself becoming very proud of what you know? You can catch any of these things inside yourself and become willing for them to be changed. It's amazing what begins to happen. You see, somewhere along the way, our activities, our actions are going to have to be based on courtesy and kindness, justice. No, not justice, because we might get that back. Mercy. Mercy. And when we are not consistently acting from these, not being concerned or disturbed about what others are doing to us, only concerned about what we're doing to others, doing good to them that despitefully use you. Can you do good to them that despitefully use you? Good. Is the idea of inventory then spiritually and religiously and scientifically sound? I think I can establish even further that it is. Your mind is a goal-seeking and attaining device. And by that, it is the goal of your mind to become what it already is, perfect, and to demonstrate that perfection in your life. And in order to achieve this, your mind contains, or is really, a servo mechanism. Now listen to what Dr. Maxwell Maltz, a world-renowned plastic surgeon and psychiatrist, has to say in his great book, Psycho-Cybernetics, about servo mechanism. He says that all servo mechanisms, by their very nature, contain memories of past eras, failures, painful and negative experiences. And these negative experiences do not inhibit but contribute to the learning process as long as they're used properly as negative feedback and are seen as deviations from the positive goal which one desires. For example, if you see anger as something you wish to continue to express, then your goal becomes the expression of anger, not the separation from it. But if you see anger as unacceptable behavior, not necessary in the spiritual being, certainly natural and normal in the human mind, in the animal side of us, it was necessary for fight or flight. But do you still wish to run and hide? Do you still wish to run and hide in the bedroom with door closed? That's flight. That's flight from reality. It's not consistent with your spiritual reality. Now, do you wish to practice another system? Okay, then you see anger and these unacceptable inner traits no longer as goals to be experienced and relieved, but to be separated from. However, as soon as the error has been recognized as such and correction of course made, it is equally important that the error be consciously forgotten and the successful attempt remembered and dwelt upon. The successful attempt, I caught myself in the middle of it and I didn't go through with it. That is a successful experience. I do not have to be that way. Isn't that fantastic? You and I have been shown that we are spiritual beings and that if we will fulfill the conditions of that experience, then our outer world will begin to conform. Your outer world, my friend, is consistent with what you cause yourself to be in your moment-to-moment experience of life. It will always be consistent with that. It can never fail to be, because that's the universal law of your life. So if you don't like what your life is, then change what you are putting into it moment by moment, and you will experience a revolution. The life of faith demands a revolution in our sense of reality. In our consciousness, the body is more real than the soul, electricity more real than thought, power more real than love, utility more real than truth, and together they form the world incomparably more real than God to that person. How difficult even in prayer to sense the reality of God, to mix with people, perform the duties of the day, and still to say, God is more real than all of this. The God in you is more real than the garbage that you're separating from. So it is.